At first, they laughed because this noble's land had nothing. No money, no knights, no future. Lord Cassius Vane was the joke of the Northern Territories, a man whose entire inheritance consisted of 47 starving farmers, a crumbling manor, and debt collectors who visited more often than rain. Then he found it, beneath the old well behind the village chapel, hidden for centuries under collapsed stone and forgotten wards, a dungeon. Not just any dungeon, a living, breathing labyrinth that pulsed with monster cores and awakening energy. That night, Cassius locked the village gates, gathered his pathetic farmers in the town square, and smiled for the first time since his reincarnation. From today, he announced, you're not farmers anymore. You're recruits, and class starts at dawn in hell. The neighboring nobles would keep laughing for exactly 3 more months. Then they would start screaming, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind to the morning everything changed. Cassius Vane woke to the sound of rats fighting over something dead in his walls. Charming. He stared at the water-stained ceiling of Ashwick Manor, watching a spider spin its web in the corner, while memories that didn't belong to this body cascaded through his mind like a waterfall of broken glass. Colonel James Shen, 32 years of military service, 4 wars, 17 successful operations behind enemy lines. Dead at 54 from a heart attack in a Pentagon briefing room, mid-sentence, explaining troop deployment logistics to generals who weren't listening. And now this. He sat up slowly, joints popping, and examined his new hands. Pale, soft, the hands of a man who had never held anything heavier than a wine goblet. The original Cassius Vane had been the 4th son of a minor noble house, shipped off to the kingdom's most worthless territory, as a polite way of saying, please go die somewhere we don't have to watch. The manor groaned around him. Half the roof leaked. The servants had fled months ago when the money ran out. His entire staff consisted of one elderly cook who stayed purely out of spite and a stable boy who was definitely stealing what little remained in the larder. Cassius walked to the window and looked out at his domain. Ashwick, 47 farmers scratching survival from rocky soil that barely grew weeds. A single muddy road leading to nowhere important. Mountains to the north that blocked trade routes. Badlands to the east that bred nothing but misery. His territory's contribution score to the crown was so low that tax collectors had stopped bothering to visit. It cost more to send them than they'd ever collect. In the distance, he could see the green fields of Baron Harwick's territory. Fertile, profitable, everything Ashwick wasn't. Pathetic, he muttered, but even as he said it, something stirred in his chest. Not despair, something older, harder. He'd built armies from nothing before, turned underfunded units into precision instruments of war. The Pentagon had called him a miracle worker. His enemies had called him a demon. This body was weak. This territory was worthless. This situation was impossible. Cassius smiled. He'd always loved impossible. The village market, if you could call 3 rickety stalls and a communal well a market, was already buzzing with tension when Cassius arrived. He dressed simply, practical wool instead of noble finery, and most of the villagers didn't even recognize him first. Then he saw it. A thick-necked man with a cruel smile had a farmer pinned against a wall. The farmer was old, maybe 60, with the stooped shoulders of someone who had spent his entire life bowing. His name was Willem. Cassius recalled from the territory records. Grew turnips. Badly. Protection fees are due, old man. The bully's voice carried across the square. Unless you want another visit from my friends tonight. Please, Marcus. I have nothing left. Then find something. Marcus Thorne shoved the old man harder. Or maybe I'll take it out of your granddaughter instead. She's what, 15 now? Old enough to learn how the world works. The other villagers watched with dead eyes. They'd seen this before. Many times. Nobody moved. Nobody helped. Because what was the point? Their lord couldn't even feed himself. Cassius felt something cold settle into his bones. Not anger. Anger was wasteful. This was calculation. Assessment. Marcus Thorne stood 6'2", maybe 220 pounds, most of it muscle. His stance was wide, weight on his back foot, chin up with arrogance. He had a knife on his belt, but hadn't drawn it. Hadn't needed to in years. He was a predator who had never met a real threat. Let him go. The words cut through the square like a blade. Everyone turned. Marcus squinted at the thin young man approaching, then laughed. Well, the noble who can't even feed himself. What are you going to do, Lord Vane? Bleed on me. Cassius kept walking. Steady. Measured. His eyes never left Marcus's center of mass. I said let him go. Or what? Marcus released Willem and turned fully, spreading his arms wide. You'll write a strongly worded letter to the crown? Beg Baron Harwick for help? Everyone knows you're finished, boy. This territory is mine in everything. But name, and soon. Cassius moved, his leg hooked behind Marcus's lead ankle at the exact moment his palm struck the bully solar plexus. Basic physics. Momentum plus leverage plus precise targeting of the celiac plexus nerve cluster. Marcus went down like a slaughtered pig. Before the bigger man could process what happened, Cassius had his thumb pressed into the gap behind Marcus's jaw, directly on the mandibular nerve. The pain would be extraordinary, paralyzing, the kind of pain that made strong men weep. You have 3 seconds to leave my village, Cassius said quietly. If I see you again, I'll show you what I learned in places you can't imagine. 1. Marcus's eyes were bulging. Tears streamed down his face. 2. I'll go. Cassius released him. Marcus scrambled backward through the mud, dignity shattered, and fled down the road without looking back. Silence. Cassius turned and found every villager staring at him. Old Willem, a woman clutching her children, a blacksmith frozen mid-step, and one man, massive, bear-like, watching Cassius with eyes that held neither gratitude nor fear, only intense, calculating wariness. Garrett Stone, the village's unofficial leader, the man others looked to when everything went wrong. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. But something shifted in that moment. A recognition between predators. Garrett didn't trust him. Cassius could see that clearly. But he was paying attention now. That was enough. For now. That night, Cassius couldn't sleep. Something was wrong. No, something was pulling at him. A sensation he'd never experienced in either life. Like a hook behind his sternum, tugging him toward the manor cellar. His soul resonance. The strange ability he'd awakened with in this new body, the one thing the original Cassius had never possessed. He could feel energy flows, sense things others couldn't. And right now, that sense was screaming. He descended the cellar stairs with a candle, following the pull through wine racks empty of wine, past storage rooms empty of stores, until he reached a wall that shouldn't exist. Solid stone, except his resonance said otherwise. Cassius pressed his palm against the cold surface and pushed. The wall moved. Ancient mechanisms groaned to life. Stone grated against stone. Dust that hadn't been disturbed in centuries billowed into the air, and before him opened a doorway carved with symbols that predated the kingdom itself. Beyond it lay darkness, but not empty darkness. Cassius descended. The passage opened into a chamber so vast his candle couldn't find the ceiling. Crystal formations jutted from the walls, pulsing with soft blue light. And at the chamber's center stood an archway of black stone, thrumming with power that made his teeth ache. A dungeon entrance. His soul resonance expanded outward, mapping what lay beyond, and what he felt made his breath catch. 50 floors. 50 floors of monsters, resources, equipment caches, and power beyond anything the surface world could imagine. A primal dungeon, ancient and unregistered, sleeping beneath his worthless territory for centuries. Waiting. For him. Cassius's lips curled into the first genuine smile since his reincarnation. This changes everything. 3 days in the dark. 3 days of mapping corridors that shouldn't exist, cataloging spawn patterns with the obsessive precision of a man who'd spent his previous life turning chaos into spreadsheets. Cassius moved through the dungeon's upper floors like a ghost, his soul resonance pulsing outward in waves that painted pictures no torch could reveal. The monsters didn't see him. They didn't need to. He wasn't here to fight, not yet. He was here to learn. Floor 1 held shadow rats the size of hunting hounds, their fur rippling with darkness that made them hard to track. They spawned in clusters of 3 near the crystalline resource nodes, respawning exactly 47 minutes. After death, Floor 2 introduced bone crawlers, skeletal centipedes that burst from the walls without warning. Floor 3 gave him his first glimpse of actual treasure, healing herbs that glowed faintly purple, growing in patches near the Guardian Chamber. Floor 4 nearly killed him, twice. But by the time Cassius emerged on the 3rd evening, covered in grime and smelling like something that had crawled out of a grave, he had what he needed. Complete tactical assessment, spawn timers, resource locations, equipment drop rates from the few creatures he'd been forced to dispatch, and a plan so audacious it bordered on insanity. Finding Garrett Stone wasn't difficult. The man spent his evenings in the same place every night, the village's excuse for a tavern, nursing watered-down ale and staring at nothing. The weight of leadership without any power to actually lead. Cassius had seen that look before in officers who'd been given impossible orders and told to make miracles happen. He sat down across from Garrett without invitation. "I need 47 soldiers." Garrett didn't look up. "You're drunk, my lord. I'm offering you a future." Now those weathered eyes rose, and the contempt in them could have curdled milk. "A future? From you, the lord who can barely afford to feed himself, let alone arm a militia." "Not a militia." Cassius leaned forward. "Raiders. Hunters. I'm going to train every able-bodied adult in this village to fight, and when I'm done, they'll be capable of crushing Count Draven's professional soldiers like insects." The laugh that erupted from Garrett's throat was ugly, raw, the sound of a man who'd heard too many noble promises and buried too many friends who'd believed them. "You're not drunk. You're mad. Possibly. We're farmers." Garrett's fist hit the table hard enough to rattle cups 3 seats down. Half-starved farmers with no weapons, no training, and no chance against armored knights. "What exactly do you plan to arm us with? Pitchforks? Strong language? Something better?" "There is nothing. There's a dungeon beneath this village." Silence. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses down on a conversation like a physical thing. Garrett's face cycled through disbelief, confusion, and finally settled on cold fury. Another noble playing games. He stood so fast his chair crashed backward. "Playing games with peasant lives because you're bored, because we're nothing to you, because our deaths don't matter. As long as you're entertained, sit down." "I will not. Your daughter." Cassius's voice dropped to something quiet and sharp. "Mira, the coughing's getting worse, isn't it? The same sickness that took your wife. And the medicine costs more than this entire village earns in a year." Garrett's hands clenched in a fist that could have crushed stone. For a moment, Cassius genuinely thought the man might kill him, might wrap those massive fingers around his throat and squeeze until something snapped. Instead, Garrett turned and walked out without another word. Cassius watched him go. Progress. The footsteps behind him were deliberately quiet enough that most people wouldn't have noticed. But Cassius had spent 3 days in a dungeon where silence meant survival, and his senses had sharpened accordingly. "You can come out, Elena." She emerged from the shadows near the tavern's back in trance, her green eyes gleaming with calculated interest. "You found something under the manor. Something valuable. Were you following me?" "For 2 days." She didn't apologize, didn't explain, simply stated fact. "You descend before dawn, emerge after sunset, and each time you return you're more confident, more certain." Her lips curved. "That's not the behavior of a man exploring empty cellars. Smart. Dangerously smart. What do you want? A steak?" Elena moved closer, dropping into the seat Garrett had vacated. "Whatever you're building, whatever game you're playing, I want in. My skills for a share of the outcome." "You don't even know what the outcome is." "I know it's better than rotting in this village until Draven decides he wants our land badly enough to take it." Cassius studied her for a long moment. The failed merchant's daughter who'd somehow ended up in the kingdom's most worthless territory. The only literate person in Ashwick. A woman with every reason to claw her way toward power and no loyalty to anything but her own survival. Exactly what he needed. Follow me. The descent to the dungeon felt different with witnesses. Elena's sharp intake of breath when the crystal formations came into view. Garrett, whom they found brooding at the village edge and convinced with nothing more than a look, stopping dead. As the Blackstone archway came into focus. Gods above, Elena whispered. Gods have nothing to do with it. Cassius moved toward the entrance. This is a primal dungeon. 50 floors. Monsters, resources, and equipment beyond anything the surface world possesses. Garrett found his voice first. You want us to fight those things?